So we recently got the newest selection pack along with the new ban list. So let's do a tier list on the Master Duel meta right now. And you can see I'm going to be covering quite a few decks this one because we've also got the previous selection pack from the end of last month too. Which I know most people, that one's pretty forgettable, but we still have to cover some decks from that one. But the first deck, I mean, obviously we got to talk about is Malice. This is clearly the best deck in Master Duel right now. I don't think I'm gonna get many arguments about that. This deck has all of its in-archetype support. Basically, it has March Hare. Now we're in a format where we also have 2 Gold Sark. This deck is unbelievable. It plays through conventional hand traps like Butter. Oftentimes, it feels like the only way to stop this deck is with a Floodgate hand trap, basically resolving like a Maxi or a Lancia or a Chaos Hunter half the time. And I say half the time because Chaos Hunter loses to literally anybody that's not playing Terahertz and instead is playing Nightmare Cerberus instead. So the fact that Nightmare Cerberus is out to Chaos Hunter means that there's only like really a few reliable hand traps that you can use to actually stop this deck. Because this deck has like there's no pre-hits, all of its cards are at 3, and yeah, it's resilient in the sense that it makes a decent board, not the strongest board you'll see like in Master or anything, but the fact that it also draws 3 to 4 cards and plays 17 non-engine means that you can do whatever you want to the board. You still have to deal with whatever board they make, which, you know, by the way, banishes, and banishing cards is really hard to deal with for most decks that aren't the mirror match. But you also have to deal with the fact that they probably drew 3 to 4 hand traps along the way, and yeah, this is the reason why like Lancia is all over the place. And then we're because of Malice being the most dominant deck, there's like far-reaching repercussions for the meta as well, based on the non-engine that people are running too, with Lancia being everywhere. And then, you know, you follow on that thought, decks that are notably hurt by Lancia also get affected in the crossfire because of Malice. Speaking of which, you know, the next deck, the other deck, you know, there are the other decks that came in this pack besides Malice, and one of them is the Tenyi cards. And let's start with the positives, okay? So the positive is that Tenyi Swordsoul has an auto win versus Malice, and that is Arch Nemesis Protos. You go first, you summon Protos, call Dark, and that's basically GG versus Malice. And, you know, any other Dark deck by extension. And this deck consistently, with the Tenyi cards now, has lines to consistently search pros every time you do your combo. Provided you don't get Lancia. If this is one of the first of many decks that gets caught in the crossfire, the Malice crossfire, because of people running Lancia. And the Tenyi cards do not appreciate getting Lancia. You know, Ashuna, Vishuddha, all of the Tenyi cards have to banish from the graveyard in order to get their effects, especially Ashuna summoning a Tenyi monster from your deck. You can't do that under Lancia. It's really bad. Also, what you can't do under Lancia is you cannot summon Protos. So yes, if you get Lancia as you're playing Tenyi Swordsoul, you're basically just playing Swordsoul minus the Tenyi cards, and which means that you're normal summoning Moye. And you're normal summoning Moye in 2025. There's a reason why people have not played Swordsoul prior to the support for like over a year now, because it simply is not strong enough to compete in the meta. And yeah, that's the issue. Now this deck is obviously it has a wing condition. If you don't get Lancia, you know, it's fine. This deck is better at playing through hand traps now. You know, it's not just like get Infern on Moye and then you like pass most of the time. You do have extension, you do have ways. You do also lose the Maxi, so like you on Anfuola, so like you lose all of the same Floodgate hand traps as well that Malice loses to, without like necessarily the comparable upside. But I mean, Swordsoul Tenyi before was a deck that I would put like I would probably put it below even the lowest here right now, which is like the top left, which represents decks that most of your games are going to end with you clicking the icon in the top left corner. So this is the support at least gives it consistency, and it gives it like some resilience to interruption, so I can put it in a rogue tier to where it's actually a playable deck. But I wouldn't. Let me just say this isn't the meta that I would choose to play Tenyi Swordsoul in. And speaking of a meta that I wouldn't choose to play a deck in, so Battle Wasps is the other deck that came from this pack. This is, man, this deck is. If you think Lancia hurt these two decks, but wait until you see Battle Wasp. Well, actually, you probably don't have to wait, because you're never gonna see Battle Wasp, because nobody's gonna play Battle Wasp in this format, because not only do you have bad matchups into Malice like most decks, but you also this is one of the decks that gets cooked the most by Lancia that I've ever seen. In case you don't know, like the main benefit of playing insects is that you have this card called one of the main benefits is that you have this card called Resonant Insect that has non-once per turns effects to when it gets banished. When it gets banished, you send a insect monster from your deck to your graveyard. That's not a once per turn. You often trigger Resonant Insects like 2, maybe even 3 times a turn, which also you banish it using cards like Doomdozer and Armor Horn. You can't do any of that shit under Lancia. You literally cannot access the best card, the strongest part of your engine under Lancia. It's actually really bad. Also, the deck plays, maybe has one of the longest combo strings in the game and then like does very little of it. For example, like the combo line I think is literally longer than a deck like Memento, and you end up with like a quarter of the interruptions that Memento does. It's like the end board is not even. It's not even good. You're just comboing it forever. You're like playing into Nibiru because like you're insect locked, so it's like you don't have payoffs. You also, ironically, being an insect deck, this is one of the decks that's the worst into Maxi. Now there is this one card. You do have this one extender that does somewhat negate Maxi, so like you do have slightly more Alpha Max than the average deck, which like I would hope this deck has something like some perks to playing it. Otherwise, it's like. Yeah, it's not many perks. Again, this is another deck where I would definitely not consider playing in this meta. It's not for this Battle Wasps. Like you gotta wait until like as long as Malice is a high tier deck, this is Battle Wasp and / Insect Pile / whatever is not gonna be. It's gonna be too hard for this deck to compete. And then on to some decks from the previous pack. Do you remember the June the pack at the end of June that had Time Seal and Bulb in it, and that had like 3 archetypes that hardly anyone was interested in? Well, we're gonna talk about those archetypes a bit. One of them was DDD. DDD got some new support. DDD, it's like I'm saying this, I'm repeating the same thing over and over again for like these rogue decks and these lower tier decks. Is that this is a deck that's also gets hurt by Lancia. Amazingly, I mean, people have been saying, Lancia useless against everything, but that's not Malice. Well, it's also not useless against some of the lower tier decks because it's pretty detrimental against the 2 lower tier decks we talked about so far already. And for DDD, DDD has 2 cards that Lancia invalidates, which are the Swirl Slime and the Necro Slime. So like basically the fusion summon engrave, the banish this monster from graveyard to fusion summon, and the banish this monster to summon a monster from hand. It's like an extender and a fusion summon. And those are obviously, in a lower tier combo deck like DDD, you need all of the extenders that you can get. So like getting cut off of 2 of your best extenders is not ideal. Also, again, another deck that just gets absolutely destroyed by Fua and Maxi, and I don't know too much about how much the support helps it, but I don't know if the support alleviates the problem of Gilgamesh also being a massive choke point for Valor and Imperm, the Link 2 that places 2 pendulums in the scales. But and honestly, I have not seen a single DDD deck since the new pack dropped, so like that should already tell you enough. I've seen a couple of the other 2 decks in the previous pack too, but I just not seen DDD. So yeah, I don't think this is exactly it. There's also like it's a combo deck that loses to Maxi and puts up a decent end board, but doesn't put up an end board that's comparable to some of the higher tier combo decks too. And you know, it doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't have an auto win option like at least the Tenyi Swordsoul deck does in Protos, if you can get to that far. Next is the Arcana Force. This deck is like a meme. In case you don't know what the goal of this deck is, this deck puts up a skill drain with this Chaos Ruler. There's this Chaos Ruler. It's called the Chaos Ruler. It's not as cool as the Chaos Ruler that we all know and love. It does not mill 5 and then special summon itself as extender. No, it's just literally a skill drain on legs for the archetype. You know how cool, man. How creative Konami, creating another low tier old archetype, buffing it by giving it a floodgate. You really outdid yourself this time, Konami. And the thing is that this deck is has the issue of a lot of older decks and a lot of decks that get legacy support is that you still have to run the old cards in the deck, and most of the time the old cards are the cards that suck to draw and are bricks, like the actual Arcana Force monsters. And like this deck has a lot of engine requirements, not a lot of room for non-engine. That makes it really hard to go second. Also, it depends on like seeing a single card in like Light Barrier. If you don't have access to Light Barrier, which is I believe only really searchable by another card, like this deck doesn't even function. So it's yeah, basically if you do nothing to this deck, you could potentially get floodgated. But if you like just breathe on it, it makes it really hard, a bit harder for that. Frankly, I don't recommend you play this deck unless you're a real fan of like GX or whatever. Next we have a Gladiator Beast, and Gladiator Beast might be the best out of these. Gladiator Beast does not get destroyed by Lancia as much as, you know, some of the other aforementioned decks down here. And this card right here, this card is called Gladiator Beast, the Midi Anus. I'm just sounding it out. I don't know how to actually pronounce the name, but that's literally how it's spelled out, the Midi Anus. Someone like enlighten me on how it's actually pronounced so that we can relay that information to NBT when he finally plays Gladiator Beast. But yeah, Gladiator Beast, I will say, I played against this deck once or twice, going second, and I got my shit pushed in because I didn't open any hand traps, or my maxi got ashed and my other hand traps got called by. And when Gladiator Beast combos off, Gladiator Beast sets up one of the strongest, most oppressive boards in the game. Like I know you're probably wondering what do you mean? Like, yes, the Gladiator Beast end board is disgusting. It sets up hard like negates. You can set up like an Appaloosa as well, like Appaloosa plus like 2 to 3 more extra negates. You have the Heraclinos, which is like 2 or 3 more spell trap negates. You have the Midi Anus, which is monster negates. So you literally can set up a field of like 6+ negates with Gladiator Beast. Now, how often will you get that far? Your results will vary. Also, Gladiator Beast is a deck that relies on the battle phase, but this is a deck that I've noticed notoriously is not good going second, because this is a deck that has a ton of engine requirements. The fact that you have to play a bunch of copies of the old Gladiator Beast monsters is not great, because most of the old Gladiator Beast monsters suck and they're like semi bricks to draw. You don't want to. It's like the hero. It's like the hero syndrome, where you have a lot of monsters that you can access easily through your combo, but you don't want to draw any of them, because drawing them doesn't help you really that much. In fact, they're bad cards most of the time. Like, what are you gonna do with a fucking Darius in your hand in the year of our Lord and Savior 2025, right? Like, so even though this is a deck that relies on the battle phase, it kind of, unless you build it directly, specifically for blinding second, you end up not having that much space for non-engine, and you just obviously that doesn't fly in this time. Like, imagine letting your mouse opponent coming off, and then you're trying to normal summon your Gladiator Beast into the board. Like, that's not really gonna work. But yeah, at least this deck also has like a somewhat of win condition. It's here. Like, Gladiator Beast enthusiasts, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the best of the decks from the last June pack, at least. Like, it's better than Arcana Force, and probably, I don't know if I would, DDD and Gladiator Beast players can fight it out in the comments which one which one of you has the better rogue deck. And yeah, Block Dragon. So the reason I'm playing Block Dragon here is because Glow Up Bulb, I think Glow Up Bulb, the Block Dragon deck is the deck that Glow Up Bulb helps the most, because now you have easy access to Gladiator Beast, especially if you run the what's it called, the Vernisylph cards, because the Vernisylph cards can literally just dump the Glow Up Bulb into the grave as like Foolish Burial, and then you can just summon it back, and then you just get a free level 1 tuner that you can use with all of your level 4 monsters, like your Clock and Mirror monsters, like Supplier, or just other Vernisylph bodies, and then you can just get a free bulb on your end board. Now that doesn't really, frankly, I don't think that changes much with the deck, because if you were getting to your end board with a deck that plays Block Dragon, you were probably going to win anyways. So yeah, does this get hurt by Lancia? A little bit, a little bit, because Block Dragon can only summon itself once. Now you will get the search from Block Dragon still, so you still get the search 3, so that's nice, but you won't be able to summon Block Dragon back multiple times as like a free Dragon Ruler extender, not non-once per turn Dragon Ruler. I don't know if that's going to be too detrimental for a deck. Like, obviously it's going to cause you some bodies and might make your end board weaker, but I mean, if you get Lancia, then you can still access Block Dragon, you still do like a semi-board, that's still okay. That seems better than a lot of other decks fare against Lancia that we've talked about already, and that we will probably talk about later on. And I guess Troll is another card that might hurt your ability to get the Block Dragon or get value out of Block Dragon, depending on how much it's played. Since, here's the thing, Droll is really bad against Malice, but because Droll is really bad against Malice, Malice can run Droll itself to Droll itself under Maxi and Fuelos as an anti-Mulcharmy and an anti-Maxi countermeasure. So it depends on like which way the playability of Droll goes. Either Malice will use Droll as an out to Maxi, or people will just cut Droll because Droll actually sucks into their best deck in the format. So like we'll see which way Droll goes. But if Droll goes up, then that's one of the hand traps that actually will affect you as a Block Dragon player more, because sometimes you're not gonna get the search off the Block Dragon, and then sometimes it just prevents you from even getting access to Block Dragon in the first place if you have to start with, if you add another card first. But yeah, I think Block Dragon is I feel like I just want to put it here, because if you don't get Lancia with Block Dragon deck and you don't get interrupted with Block Dragon deck, your board is still in an FDK. It's even though you don't directly make like a Protoss Call Dark, like directly FDK Malice like Tenyi does, I mean, your board is basically going to be that. And now onto like some decks that were affected by the ban list. So Mathmech Diameter went from 1 to 3, and I know that was a meme non-hit because it literally did not affect Mathmech's ability at all. It may help it slightly, which like I'll get to later, but in theory this is a format where this format is more friendly towards Mathmech than it has been for a long while, because theoretically Bystials should be less popular than they've been for pretty much all of 2025, because like Bystials usage has just been like steadily on the increase, or like was at its highest in a long time after the release of Fiend-Smith. And now with the release of Malice, Bystials become not as good hand traps anymore, because Bystials are not good hand traps versus Malice. So theoretically, people should be dropping Bystials, and Bystials are by far the best hand traps using as Mathmech. And Mathmech is a deck that actually does not care about Lancia. In fact, Mathmech actually kind of wants to run Lancia itself. It kind of benefits from Lancia from other ways besides just countering Malice, because the biggest thing about Mathmech is that you want to push through your Super Factorial, and the biggest weakness of Super Factorial is getting your Super Factorial either called by or Bystials, or stopped or get your graveyard interrupted in some other way, shape, or form. And if you Lancia as a way to counter called by and to counter even Bystials on your Super Factorial. So yeah, the Mathmech actually doesn't mind running Lancia as much as like other decks, because it has other benefits, as well as winning the hand trap minigame. Now that you can also Lancia, Call by the Grave, and Cross Out Destinator. Don't we just love more minigames in Master Duel? But yeah, the problem with that is that the best deck in the format is Malice, and Malice is like the one deck that actually wants to play Bystials still, because the Bystials are good extenders. So in theory, if Malice still plays Bystials, because Malice is the deck that's most likely to play Bystials, if they continue playing Bystials, and Malice is like by far the most played deck, then it won't matter if every other deck wants to drop Bystials, because as long as the most played deck still plays Bystials, that's still going to be a problem that you're going to face in your most common matchup. And I will say is that the second diameter helps in a sense to play around Bystials a little bit, because if your opponent wants to play around Lancia, which like I'm sure most people won't actually do this because they're not aware, and Mathmech hasn't been a common matchup in a while, but if you want to play around Lancia on protecting your super factorial, you need to Bystial you usually want to Bystial the Mathmech monsters in grave during the end phase of the Mathmech player's turn before it passes to them, because Lancia protects your super factorial on your opponent's turn. But that means you can theoretically banish your opponent's Mathmech monsters during their end phase so that they won't have enough targets on super factorial. The thing is that with diameter going to 2 now, that doesn't work as well, because if you Bystial their diameter in the end phase, they can just on your turn just Terahertz send the second diameter to the graveyard, so they still have the full super factorial setup. So yeah, so that's kind of a counter to the end phase Bystial. But if you try to Bystial on your turn, like after it passes to you, then you run the risk of getting your Bystial Lancia, and then that also protects the super factorial. So it's a bit of like a weird like 50-50-ish like game you have to play with the Mathmech player when you have a Bystial. And yeah, although granted, if you're playing Malice and like you're trying to play around Lancia, there's not much you can do. Like if you're playing Malice against Mathmech and the Mathmech player drops Lancia versus you, like it doesn't really, it probably won't matter whether you played around it or not, because you got Lancia at the end of the day. So it's, yeah, this Mathmech, it's not good into the Malice engine. Like this, the Malice card, if the Malice card that gets playing at all, like your engine is cooked as the Mathmech player, so like you really gotta prevent them, and then that means usually through hand traps. And Mathmech, while it can run a decent number of hand traps, especially with like Cyan Mighty going to 3 and Diameter going to 2 or going to 3, even though you only run 2 Diameter, it kind of makes it so you don't run as many hand traps as you would think. Like there are lots of decks that run way more hand traps than Mathmech that you would consider mid-range as well. So like, yeah, we'll put it down here for now, because it just has a terrible matchup versus Malice. And the other deck, what was that card? Astrograph Sorcerer went from like 1 to 3. I don't know how much that actually helps Pendulum decks or Pendulum slot decks, and I don't think it changes too much about how this type of deck operates. It's that if you go first and you win the coin flip, you just combo off and you FDK your opponent. That's pretty much it. I'm sure 3 Astrograph Sorcerer will make that even easier and even helps that. And as far as I'm concerned, Lancia does not really stop your plays in any significant way, or if at all. Actually, I'm trying to struggle to even think of what a card in the Pendulum deck that Lancia even hits. But yeah, Drago Slayer, go first, auto win going second. We don't want to talk about that. This deck is not great going second, especially since it has even less room for hand traps now that it's running 3 Astrograph. But I will say that for this kind of deck, it might actually be better for going second in this format than previous formats, because there is a dedicated auto win, like auto turn skip hand trap in the format now. Another auto skip one besides Maxi and Fuvalas, there's Lancia now. So you already didn't have room to run enough hand traps reliably anyways. So the fact that Lancia is an option now that can potentially turn skip your opponent makes it so like you have a higher chance of actually being able to do something to your opponent going second. Whereas before, when decks just played through every hand trap known to man, like anyways, and there wasn't like a floodgate option like Lancia, it was really hard to go second with this deck. Now, at least more of the time now, you can sack your opponent by drawing Lancia in this format as opposed to previous formats. So, yeah, that's kind of how it is with like these going first decks now. That's even though the format got stronger, they're the Malice is still not as good of a deck going first as Drago Slayer is, and you have more limited options to try and sack your opponent going second now, as opposed to just being completely helpless. Speaking of completely helpless, okay, maybe that's too harsh, but Snake Eyes. We're talking about like not like pure Snake Eyes, because you literally cannot run pure Snake Eyes, quote unquote pure Snake Eyes, because Oak is fucking banned. You have like literally 2 Snake Eyes names. I don't know if we run Birch. Birch seems kind of ass, I'm not gonna lie, but like if the fact that you have to rely on Birch possibly now to do your combos, that should say enough about the state that Snake Eyes is in. And probably Millennium Fiend-Smith Snake Eyes is like the way to play it if you don't want to play Fire King, which like we'll get to later. But yeah, with Oak ban, this deck has a lot more choke points now. You can't roll yourself really. It's way easier to cut you off the Snake Eyes engine than it was before. The thing is though that this deck, if it goes uninterrupted, it's still gonna put up that stupid board that you all know well enough with like the Fiend-Smith, like the Desiree, the Flamberge, IP, Appaloosa, all that stuff. So you're still gonna get cooked if you don't have a way to interrupt Snake Eyes going second. And here's the thing is that although like yes, there's a very defined choke point in Snake Eyes, sometimes they can still, even though Golem went to 2 as well, which is very funny. Or Golem went from 3 to 1, so you lost 2 copies of Millennium Golem as well. But let's say your opponent goes Sengenjin, and then they open Sengenjin, and you have a hand trap, but you're like, do I have to hit the Zombie Vampire? Do I have to Gamba? Do I have to hit the Fiend-Smith Engine? Do I let them do their entire Millennium line with Zombie Vampire, with Fiend-Smith Engine, and then wait all that just to potentially hit a Snake Eyes card? Or not, if you use your hand trap early on the Millennium Engine, then suddenly you don't have the hand trap for the Snake Eyes engine. So basically, this deck is strong not because of the Snake Eye engine itself. The Snake Eyes engine itself is kind of terrible without the Oak, but but the Millennium Engine with the Fiend-Smith engine is still kind of stupid and still kind of extends very well, and also does not give a shit about Lancia. So that's a benefit too. I don't know how unplayable this deck is. Like, people have been saying that like with Oak at 0, like with Oak being banned, this deck is like completely unplayable. I'm not sure if I would go that far. And honestly, depending on the hand this deck draws, this deck could either feel like it's just as strong as it ever was, or it can feel like it's literally unplayable because you don't have any Snake Eyes cards. So I'm gonna split the difference and put it here right now. I'm not sure if anybody... It's just another deck that people are really sick of, and I'm not sure how popular it's going to be, and how many people actually want to try to make Snake Eyes work without Oak. I mean, that seems like a... Like people mostly played Snake Eyes Fiend-Smith, not because... I don't feel like because they enjoyed that much. I feel like the majority of people played Fiend-Smith Snake Eye because it was the best deck, so like that's the reason why. And now that it's no longer the best deck, you have to suffer through playing it without Oak. I don't feel like it's gonna be a very popular deck, but I'll just put it here. So the other fire decks. So Oak being banned hurts Snake Eyes. Does not really hurt Fighting Snake Eyes. It actually does not hurt Rescue Ace at all. But I don't think Rescue Ace is even that good, to be honest. It's like Rescue Ace never ran Oaks. Like Rescue Ace technically was unhit, but I don't think Rescue Ace is really that great. Rescue Ace, funnily enough, out of all the Snake Eyes variants, Rescue Ace gets hit by Lancia the most because you can't summon Preventer or Turbulence, which are like 2 of your, especially Preventer is like your best extender. So you're kind of pigeonholed into emergency line if you get Lancia. And also this deck is kind of vulnerable. I mean, most decks, like I didn't talk about Dominus Impulse. Yeah, that's another reason why Malice is good. But yeah, Dominus Impulse hurts Rescue Ace, like it hurts most of these decks here. So it's, yeah, like Rescue Ace has not seen very much play either. So I don't even, not sure if Rescue Ace deserves to be tier 3. I'm going to be honest. This is because like it has no results, because nobody is interested in playing this. I might even tend to drop it here because it does not have a particularly good matchup into Malice, I will say, and didn't get any better from the ban list, right? They didn't get, it's not like it got new support, so it's, yeah, we'll do this for now. And Fire King Snake Eyes. So Fire King Snake Eyes, I think this is probably going to be, if you're going to play the Snake Eyes engine in some way or form, I think this is probably the best way to play the Snake Eyes engine, because I mean Fire King Snake Eyes does benefit from Oak, but it wasn't necessary. Like you don't really need to go through Oak. Oak was more of a follow-up in Fire King Snake Eyes than anything, because a lot of the time you wouldn't even access Oak. You would use OSS to get Pawnex, or you would use your Ash to search Pawnex, and you would have the OSS Engrave as follow-up to search the Oak on the follow-up, but like you wouldn't. It wasn't a necessary part of your combo. So I've played Fire King without Oak quite a lot, and like the deck was completely playable. So like I didn't. It is better with Oak, but it's not a significant difference to where the deck becomes like it's not a significant difference to how the deck plays if you don't have Oak. And I will say is that there are some things that Fire King Snake Eyes has in this format that actually like give like that are like words are hard. Okay, so Fire King Snake Eyes, this deck can do some shit this format, and one is that this deck does benefit from Lancia more than just using it as a floodgate against Malice, because this deck doesn't like to deal with Called by the Grave, and Lancia is a pretty reliable out to Called by the Grave. Called by the Grave is one of the few common pieces of non-engine that actually can do something to your board, so it's nice there. But also, Zombie Vampire in a format where everyone's trying to find Lancia is really degenerate. Like, I will say, imagine you're playing against Malice, for example, right? And they're playing Lancia for like the mirror match or whatever, and then you go Zombie Vamp, you get hand trapped or whatever. You can still make a Zombie Vampire most of the time, even through a hand trap, and you mill 8 cards, 4 from you, 4 from your opponent. You have 8 chances to find a Lancia, and if you find a Lancia, what you can do is you can Flamebird scale Lancia, either player's Lancia, you or your opponent's, and then draw phase, Flamberge, summon back the Lancia to your side of the field, tribute the Lancia from your field, and apply the Lancia effect. That's really, really dumb. Also, it applies the same way for Chaos Hunter too. So like, if you're playing against any Malice deck that's trying to play their own Lance, that's trying to get cute and play their own Lancia or their own map or their own Chaos Hunter for the mirror match, you can Zombie Vampire mill them. Well, the game is the game is kind of over there. Also, like, even if your Malice opponent isn't, like, you can just mill your own Lancias. Like, Zombie Vampire lets you know if you're playing against Malice first off. So if you see that you are playing Malice and you mill your Lancia or Chaos Hunter or whatever you decide to run, then then you have you have a way to dig for your Lancia, as opposed, like, more so than other decks can. Besides just artifacts. Besides, like, Artifact Dagda. Like, yes, technically every deck can play Artifact Dagda, but, who wants to do Artifact Dagda lines when you can just do Zombie Vampire as part of your normal combo anyways. And also, this deck can run Dominus Impulse too, and Dominus Impulse is a really good card. It's also one of the better hand traps versus Malice. Usually won't stop them by itself, but it's more impactful than the average hand trap, like, let's say something like an Imperm or especially Ash, and Ash is, like, so bad against Malice. But now the thing is the problem is that this deck doesn't care about Lancia itself. It's just that this deck doesn't play the most hand traps, and if you let your Malice opponent establish their board, it's really fucking bad, because all of Malice's interruption involves banishing, and Fire King cards don't like being banished. So I'll say that it's if anything, this matchup tends to be more towards a 50-50 matchup, in that whoever goes first is heavily favored. But that's Yu-Gi-Oh! At least that's more than can be said for other decks who would wish to have a 50-50 matchup with Malice. Crystron. So Crystron, this is basically this deck got hit on the ban list, quote unquote, in that its Millennium Golem went from 3 to 1. So it lost 2 copies of Millennium starters, which are honestly kind of important in this format, because if this deck gets Lancia, the only thing you can do is use player Millennium cards. So depending on whether this deck gets Lancia, this deck either goes from like here to here. It is such a wide range. Like if you don't get Lancia, this deck is just as strong as it was before last format, in that it was one of the best decks in the game. So there's that. But now, just randomly 15% of the time, or like around, like, I say 20% of the time now, more often, you're just gonna get turn skipped by a fucking Floodgate hand trap in Lancia, and that's really not nice. That doesn't help your win percentages. So it's like 80% of the time this deck is fine, and then like the 20% of the time they have Lancia and you don't have Call by the Grave or Crossout, you just get destroyed. So like this deck, I mean, Malice isn't the best at playing the boards, I will say, and Crystron is very good at playing through hand traps. So if your Malice opponent does not like Lancia you, then that's actually, if they even play Lancia, Malice is like the one deck that tends to play Lancia the least, because Lancia turns off Malice's own interruptions for obvious reasons. So theoretically, you will face less Lancias versus Malice. So you would actually have a better matchup versus stuff like Malice than you would against other random decks that main 3 Lancia and Chaos Hunter. Like that's as weird as like as odd as that to say is that like Malice being one of your better matchups, provided they aren't playing Lancia as much as the other decks. But yeah, we will probably at Worlds we will see the Smigers in Paris. So yeah, next let's go on to the some of the other best decks of the last format. So like we already covered Crystron a bit, but next is Blue Eyes. So Blue Eyes, I'm like somehow one of the biggest believers in Blue Eyes when everyone's saying like this deck everyone's been downplaying this deck ever since like the fucking semi-limits of Sage and Maiden, which is like, that never made sense to me, like how that would be the deal breaker of this deck. This deck was like the second or third best deck last format, and this is a deck that I think has a decent shot at versus Malice. I mean, it's not great. Like obviously the Malice end board, if you let them get to their end board, it's not good for Blue Eyes because they're just banishing your shit, and like Blue Eyes does not appreciate having all his shit get banished. But you are a deck like Crystron that has room for tons of hand traps. Like you have room for like 16, 17, 18, even plus non-engine. So like compared to other decks, you have a better chance of preventing your Malice opponent from setting up their board than a lot of other decks do. And keep in mind, like in the I know like it's TCG, it doesn't really apply one-to-one, obviously, but Blue Eyes released in TCG after the first wave of Malice was released, and it was considered one of the, maybe not the best deck, but it was considered one of the top decks, like one of the 4 or 5 best decks in the format, even in the Malice and / Ryzeal format. And then after the Malice got the rest of its support, like March Hare, and even after it got its Allen support, like Addict Nister cards, Blue Eyes was still a deck that was capable of topping. Now it wasn't top tier at that point anymore or anything, but it was still a capable deck in the format against Malice. Since among all the top decks, Blue Eyes is like the one that has probably the room for the most hand traps. So like it has the highest chance of stopping Malice. And then going first, you should still be very favored against Malice, because Malice's main game plan is trying to stop you from setting up your board, because it mainly runs a lot of hand traps, because you want to hand trap your Malice opponent. You don't want them to set up. That's why hand traps are very common, way more common than board breakers. And Blue Eyes plays through Blue Eyes plays through hand traps very well, specifically the non-engine and the hand traps that people are selecting, that people are choosing to run this format. Once again, Lancia and Chaos Hunter are a joke. In fact, if I get Lancia as Blue Eyes, I'm happy, because that means you're not going to bitch me for the rest of the turn. So like that's even a bonus. Like Drill Beam is not as good into Malice as it is against other decks, but Drill Beam is still a solid card. Like it's not the most insane. It's not an Omni-Negate Banish that's automatically like gets rid of a card like it does against every other matchup. But still, Drill Beam, at worst, Drill Beaming a name is still fine. Like if your opponent goes Dormouse effect and then you go Drill Beam on the Dormouse, it uses up, it negates the Dormouse, and it uses up the Dormouse comes back, but it uses up the once per turn Dormouse summon from Banish too. So it eats up both of Dormouse's effects still, or whatever normal summon your opponent has. And keep in mind that you can Drill Beam other cards that aren't the Malice monsters, right? Like you can Drill Beam the Field Spell, for example. You can Drill Beam Allure. You can Drill Beam Goatsark. There's like plenty of other targets you can Drill Beam as well. And like your other engine, especially like your other piece of info, like your Majesty, to pop your opponent's monster is actually very good against Malice. Malice is it's not great into removal that doesn't banish. So like stuff like Majesties, for example. And yeah, also you can Drill Beam any other Link monster that's not a Malice. So for example, if they go slash mage. You can drill beam that. Gone. If they try to go Linger Rebuild to try and neutralize your Majesty, you can drill beam that as well, or you can just Valor it too, because like you're gonna have Valors in your hand too. Like you are favored going first, and you are you have a shot going second just because of the amount of hand traps you run. So I still am a believer in Blue Eyes. I don't think it's gonna be arguable tier 1. It was arguable tier 1 last format. It is not arguable tier 1 this format, but I think it's still fine. Another deck that was arguable tier 1 deck last format, and that's like Mermail. So Mermail, common trend of all these decks up here is that like these these two, I don't know about. I think okay, maybe putting Crystron up there was a bit preemptive because Crystron has the Lancia problem, whereas Mermail does not have the Lancia problem. I don't think there's anything relevant that Lancia stops in Mermail either. You could figure out. Okay, so there's one thing you can stop Minstrel. Like you can preemptively stop Minstrel. You cannot chain the Minstrel, because if you chain the Minstrel, I mean, all it does is prevent them from seeing your hand. It's like, okay, cool, whatever. But you could, if you preemptively use Lancia versus Mermail, then they can't use Minstrel to discard. But at the same time, that's not really a big deal. You can just do other plays to get Waters in Graveyard that don't involve Minstrel. Like, yeah, Mermail does really not care. It does not care about Lancia one bit. And Mermail still has the FTK when going first, and especially now that people have found ways to make Mermail more consistent, i.e. playing Sekka's Light. So there's another thing. And I will say is that if Malice plays a lot of Droll, Droll would hurt Flake against Fire King as well, but it would also hurt Mermail a bit more if they do decide to play Droll for the maxi. Droll does not really affect Blue Eyes, so that's another point in favor of Blue Eyes. But yeah, this deck going second into Malice doesn't like it doesn't feel great just because all they do is banish your stuff. So like I suppose it's okay. It's not like any worse than like Fire King Snake Eyes probably, for example. So it's, yeah, I don't know if that's for the tier 2 or not. I don't see it getting. Mermail is a deck that probably doesn't change too much from last format, just because like its game plan is the same. It's just going first, try to FTK your opponent in some way, shape, or form. You still have all the options, all the degenerates that you do going first, and going second, it's like draw Poseidon, draw Lancia, forehead. So, yeah, I don't know if it's capable of fully pushing through a Malice end board, because the Malice end board probably involves them drawing like anywhere like random copies of like Dominus Impulse or like other hand traps too. But it's I can see a world, because like Mermail is competitive in formats where Malice is legal in the TC as well. So yeah. Next we'll talk about another tier 2-ish deck from last round, which is like Tenpai and Sky Striker. Sky Striker is not Sky Striker. I will continue putting Sky Striker down here because Sky Striker, pure Sky Striker is not the best way to play Striker cards. In fact, it is now not even the second best way to play Striker cards. If you really want to, you could play Striker Malice. It is a deck. It's not optimal in Master Duel, because we have March here, so we already have like a bunch of extension. But theoretically, it gives you plays under Lancia as well. And like if you do decide to play the Malice, this Striker deck, it's probably gonna be better than the pure Striker deck. So yeah. Also, I didn't mention when I mentioned talking about Mathmech, I didn't mention Mathmech Malice, because I think Mathmech Malice is hella fake. It makes Malice. I think it actually makes Malice significantly worse by playing the Mathmech cards. You're cutting a room for non-engine to play these cards that I guess give you a play under Lancia. That's like the only real niche I see with it, and like there are other options you can do for plays under Lancia that don't involve you running the Mathmech cards and like running that much engine and like Super Factorial and run more bricks like Sigma and like the Super Factorial and like the equation and stuff like that. So I would not recommend playing other Cybers cards, especially Mathmech in Malice. And although I don't recommend playing Sky Striker cards in Malice either, it's probably better than Pure Striker. And it's also Tenpai Striker is still probably the best deck that plays the Striker cards. And like Sky Striker, Ace, Chandra. I will admit that I don't think Sky Striker Tenpai is the way to play Tenpai now. Like legitimately don't think that's a good way to play into Malice, because the thing about Malice is that it's not just about the end board. It's the fact that Malice during your combo draws 3 to 4 cards, and if you as a Tenpai opponent let your Malice opponent draw 3 to 4 cards when they're playing 3 Ash Blossom and 3 Dominus Impulse, that's literal death. If they draw any of those cards, that's like an FTK against your Tenpai deck, because like this deck is really fragile, and like Striker Tenpai is the whole point of it is that it's supposed to break every board in the game, and that when it breaks the board, it's supposed to OTK your opponent. But if your opponent just draws 3 to 4 non-engine, like it doesn't even matter what board they have. Like they could have no board, as long as they have like an Impulse or a Ash in hand, it's gonna be very unlikely for you to OTK your opponent at that point. And that's just not like this is why I still recommend you playing Hand Trapper. At least you gotta try to stop your Malice opponent from even drawing those cards, trying to draw like. If they draw Impulse or Ash, it's already super not in your favor. So like you want to reduce the chances of them being able to do that as well. And if any deck's going to be able to stop Malice going second with hand traps, like Tenpai is going to be the deck, because Tenpai is the deck that plays the most hand traps. So like it's basically that. I don't think Tenpai is a good matchup for Malice, which is why like I don't. Also, there's people randomly playing Terahertz. So like the fact that people randomly play Terahertz also is like a counterpoint against playing Tenpai. I don't think the matchup is good regardless of what version of Malice they play and what version of Tenpai that you play. But especially, I do not recommend playing Striker Tenpai, because that's just asking to, like, the map is not in your favor. Next, Branded. So Branded, I don't think changes much. Actually, Branded, technically, Lancia does kind of affect you, but it only really stops Albion and, like, it doesn't even stop Mirror Jade, because Mirror Jade mostly you do it on your opponent's turns, which Lancia can't stop, and I guess it stops Brand and Retribution, so it stops one of like 10 lines to search Brand Fusion. It's basically if your only hand trappers and Brand is Lancia, it's not gonna save you. So yeah, I like Brand it's gonna be as good as it has been. It is a little rough playing. I actually think that the Malice matchup is not good for Branded, because again, Branded has like the Striker Tenpai issue of it doesn't play enough hand traps to stop Malice at all, and Malice plays 3 Ash and 3 Dominus Impulse, and Dominus Impulse is just as good against Brand as it is against Tenpai. So like you can let your opponent draw 3 to 4 cards, you're gonna draw one of those 6 huge like high impact hand traps versus you, and that's just gonna make your ability to go second even harder. So yeah, I will say that it better to not get better for Brand, even though there are less decks playing Bestials. The fact that Malice is the one deck that still might play Bestials doesn't really help that matchup, and I guess going first you're still decently favored, although again going first against now that the top deck runs 3 Dominus Impulse makes it a lot harder to establish your board, especially because this deck also runs like 17 other hand traps as well. But 3 Dominus Impulse, when last format there weren't many decks that ran Dominus Impulse at all, if any. I don't think any of the top tier decks besides maybe non-Striker Tenpai and like actually normally ran Dominus Impulse, because Mermail ran Impulse for a little bit, but then they started running Second Light, and obviously when you run Second Light, you drop the impulses, and Fire King Snake Eye was not the most popular version, so like that wasn't really a thing. So yeah, the fact that there's more Dominus Impulse flying around now is also like really is actually underrated hit on like Branded in this format. So, yeah, also like the gap. I know it's like tier 1 and tier 2. I feel like the gap between tier 1 and tier 2 now is a bit bigger than it was in previous formats. Like previous formats, like when Snake Eyes was up here, like you could argue is that like there wasn't as much of a gap between tier 1 and tier 2. You could argue that maybe the tier 2 decks were like tier 1.5. Now I think that the gap between Malice and the tier 2 decks is bigger than the gap was with Snake Eyes and the tier 2 decks last format. But it's just going on a tangent there. But yeah, speaking of more tier 2 decks, so Memento. So yeah, Memento doesn't really care about Lancia either. Like there's like one thing that involves banishing, which is like banishing this Memento fusion from your graveyard to like pop your Creation King or whatever, like that's like the only play. Like you can do your full combo. I'm pretty sure you can Paradise your opponent still under Lancia. So like that's, if you can do that, then like Lancia doesn't really matter to you. And yeah, this deck kind of favors board breakers a bit. It's like Brand where it does make good use of board breakers, but I'm not sure you want to be using board breakers, or you want to be playing a deck that's playing board breakers against Malice, because the aforementioned, their combo is not just about their board, it's the fact that their combo draws tons of cards as well. And yeah, Dominus Impulse, it's a bit annoying because Dominus Impulse hits both Memento Fusion and Bone Party, so those are like your main forms of extension, so that's really annoying. And it's just, yeah, it's still like, it goes first, it still can FTK your opponent, but it's a lot. Decks like Malice and the decks and the hand traps that Malice runs, much like Blue Eyes, it's a lot hard to combo against these decks because these decks run tons of lower impact hand traps, so like they could have like 2 to 3 hand traps like Impulse, or like in Blue Eyes cases it was Purge and like Ash, Valor, like that, all that stuff. If you just get hit by too many hand traps, it becomes a bit harder, especially when the hand traps stop your ways to dodge hand traps, like your Memento Fusion and your Bone Party. So yeah, I don't know, but I kind of like it better than Branded, at least because it's I have more confidence in Memento than Branded, but even though Branded performed better than Memento last format, so that's just more of a vibe based thing. Also, I guess I forgot to mention like about Purge in Blue Eyes. So one of the perks of running Blue Eyes was Purge, and Purge is not good versus Malice. It's just really not. So like that's actually like a downside for Blue Eyes. It's like, I mean, Ash is not good against Malice, and Purge is just worse Ash. Even though like if they do the line that ends on Appaloosa, which by the way, the Appaloosa being legal is another, it's another tip to cap for Malice, but Ash gets stopped by Appaloosa, at least you can Purge maybe something later in the line, like you can Purge a Chessie Cap, but like that's so late in the combo, like that's it's so much worse than Imperm is against Malice. It's just, yeah, Purge being bad is like a kind of a decent hit to Blue Eyes, because that was like Blue Eyes was like one of the decks that ran Purge, and Purge was a very good hand trap for a long time, for like the months, for basically all of Blue Eyes, Primate Blue Eyes' existence. Purge was a good hand trap until now. Now it's like, it's questionable, and I'm not even sure you would run 3 Purge. Probably you wouldn't even run 3 Purge now, but yeah. Speaking of Primate, I guess, so Primate Fiend-Smith, the Fiend-Smith decks, and this is, yeah, these decks, I was never as high on Primate Fiend-Smith as like most of the TCG regions, and especially like the Master Duel meta people, because they had it as Primate Fiend-Smith was the better Primate deck between Primate Fiend-Smith and Primate Blue Eyes, and clearly like the top players in the Duelist Cup or the World Championship qualifier did not agree with that, because there were 16 Blue Eyes in the top 100 and 1 Fiend-Smith deck in the top 100, so like that's, you know, that's kind of says it all, really. But yeah, this Malice matchup is a lot worse for Primate, because like so the Primate engine, like I talked about Drill Beam has its uses, but the Primate Fiend-Smith deck also plays Roar, and Roar is really not that impactful versus Malice at all. Like Drill Beam has its, you can use Drill Beam against other stuff that aren't like the floating Malice monsters, but Roar, like you can literally only use it on the normal summon, and with, let's say they normal summon Dormouse, you Roar, the Dormouse gets banished and then comes back, and the Roar literally did nothing but eat up the once per turn summon from banish. Like that's all it does. It's really underwhelming. I'm gonna say that. So like that's like you do use Roar because Roar is a starter, but Roar not having the additional benefit of being like actual good interruption versus the top deck in the format is like one of it's not like, it doesn't help this deck at all. Also, but I will say is that this deck has there's one thing that Fiend-Smith decks do have an advantage in that is that they make Caesar. So Caesar is actually good in this format. Caesar is really good against Malice. Caesar was like almost a liability sometimes last format because your opponent would activate Sang Engine and suddenly your Caesar is gone. Like that's it. This one Sang Engine outed yours. The one Sang Engine or the one Golem or the one Wedju Temple even just outed your Caesar straight up. But now, unless you play against Millennium Malice, which let me tell you, Millennium Malice is kind of a thing that some people are playing, and if you make Caesar versus your Malice opponent and they activate Sang Engine, like they just wanted it more, like you were never meant to win that duel, but provided they don't open the Millennium cards, Caesar is very, very good against Malice. It's a double Solemn Warning, basically a double Dominus Impulse, and we all know how Dominus Impulse is pretty good against Malice, so yeah, it makes like half of the engine, the Primite Fiend-Smith engine is like not great versus Malice, then that it's the Primite half, but the Fiend-Smith engine that makes Caesar is actually decent, provided you get that far. And other downsides though, however, is that these Fiend-Smith decks also play Bystials, and I haven't talked about Bystials extensively yet, but Bystials are not good versus Malice. They're just not. They're not good interruptions whatsoever, especially with Apples in the game. You can't even wait until the end phase and try to hit a name that they've already used in their graveyard to get rid of it for like their next turn. Like you can't even do that because they have a fucking Appaloosa to stop them from doing that. So yeah, these decks, a lot of their power came from the Bystials as well. It's like Lubellion, able to draw a card on their Necrocrypt, and like having the infinite resource engine from Regain. That stuff's not that great versus Malice. And yeah, I don't even know if you would continue to run Bystials in these decks. But then it's like, what would you run instead? Like, there's really no good replacements for like the Bystials. So it's like, yeah, it's not a fan. There's like some downsides, but there's some good qualities that Fiend-Smith decks have, but like a lot of them are also, but there's also like a lot more downsides. I guess like they don't care about Lancia. I will say is that the Primite Fiend-Smith deck in particular, I don't think you want to run Lancia in Primite Fiend-Smith, because the Lancia turns off your half of your engine too, because yeah, it turns off Primite cards, but it also turns off your Paradise play when you go Lacrima to go Requiem to summon back Lacrima to send Paradise, and then banish Paradise to send Desiree. You can't do that under your own Lancia. So it's like, you really want to like play a hand trap that's like that turns off like majority of your interruption going first. If you're playing against Malice, like sure, you probably won't care, but let's say you're shotgunning Lancia because you want to play around Allure, because a lot of Malice decks are still playing Allure, and you kind of want to play around like Allure and stuff like that by shotgunning Lancia. And if you do, and you end up not playing against Malice, then you just feel like a dumbass because you just turned off half your interruptions for no reason. So that I don't even, yeah, maybe there's the fact that Lancia conflicts with you is actually might be a bit of an issue. That's and yeah, everything I said about Primite Fiend-Smith applies to like the other Fiend-Smith deck, but I actually don't like. I don't know. This deck has never felt good in Master Duel. Like basically, the Primite deck that Lancias itself, the Primite Fiend-Smith deck that Lancias itself, basically ends on the same amount of interruptions as the normal Fiend-Smith deck without the Primite card. So I don't, and this deck relied more on Bystials because it has less like other engines. Like it's literally just Fiend-Smith cards, maybe Tour Guide to search a Maxi, which unfortunately Maxi cannot search Artifact Lancia, or Sangan I should say cannot search Artifact Lancia, because Artifact Lancia has more than 1500 defense, so you can't even do that. So I don't even know if you would run the Tour Guide engine anymore, or like definitely like kind of don't want to run the Bystials. Your one perk is that this deck has pretty much the most amount of like non-engine space in the game, like tied with Tenpai, but it's where Tenpai is trying to OTK your opponent going second and utilize its non-engine that way. I don't think you just don't really put up that much of a board, but it's basically you're risking your entire life on Caesar versus Malice. So like if they have like a single imperm, it's rough, or they even have like a single impulse or Bystial to stop you from getting the Caesar. Kind of kind of can't really win versus Malice. So I actually don't like this deck whatsoever at all. At least I know Drill Beam, like, it's not the best, but it does something. It can potentially do something. Whereas this, as I mentioned when talking about Blue Eyes, but like, this deck just doesn't feel like it does enough. And also the fact that you can't rely on Bystials when Bystials are like the best part of your deck. Honestly, it's yeah. So these other decks, these are other Fiend-Smith combo decks, Azumina, White Forest, Fiend-Smith, and Yubel, Fiend-Smith. So these were not played at all pretty much last format because of the existence of Snake Eyes, which Snake Eyes was just a strictly better Fiend-Smith combo deck. I don't believe that's the case anymore with Oak at 1. So theoretically that gives you like a niche this gives these decks a niche now to be played now that these are the best Fiend-Smith combo decks now, and not Fiend-Smith Snake Eyes. But a better combo deck also released in this time, which was Malice. So like we'll see how. I feel like these still aren't going to be that popular, and yeah, I've always overrated these decks. So that was like something I thought these decks were better than they were, but like these decks saw no play at all in the World Championship qualifiers pretty much. So I can't say that with the release of Malice that their play rate would go up, that would cause their player to go up for something. Like I don't really, I can't really see that. Even if their competition in Fiend-Smith combo decks like Snake Eyes got neutered on the balance, I still can't really see it. I think these are still fine decks. Like they also like sometimes these decks sometimes care about Lancia, sometimes they don't. So Lancia, I think Lancia shuts off, I believe, the Necro, not the Necro, but what's it called? The Arrow Eater Revive. Lancia can hit that, and it stops the Squave Scrimmer from banishing itself to summon back the Yubel, so that can cost you like maybe like 2 bodies. At the same time, I feel like that's still not the biggest deal because I mean even with -2 bodies, Yubel can still put up a very strong end board. So like I think it's fine. And like for White Forest, it's weird because if you just straight up do the White Forest combo and you open White Forest cards in your White Forest deck, then Lancia doesn't really affect you at all. But if you're doing the bridge, if you don't open White Forest cards in your White Forest deck, which does happen sometimes, and you have to bridge from Fiend-Smith to White Forest, then you can't do that under Lancia because it requires you to banish Track to make Rex Tremende, which does not work under Lancia. So if you get hand trapped once, or like if you just don't open good, then Lancia can hurt you a bit. Also, like we'll see how much. Again, it depends on how much Malice actually plays Droll. If they play Droll for anti-maxi, that's rough. If they don't, then like it's fine. Also, there's this funny interaction is that when you run Lancia and White Forest, you can set the Lancia in your back row and then use that Lancia as a send for your White Forest costs, like your RCL or your LZ, which is kind of funny. Unfortunately, it does not work with Rex Tremende because Rex Tremende got a discard from hand. So like obviously the Lancia is only a spell and trap when it's set on the field, not when it's in your hand. So it doesn't work for every combo, but you know there's some more utility you can extract out of Lancia instead of just being a Floodgate hand trap versus Malice. But yeah, overall, I mean, I'll put them higher than the other Fiend-Smith decks. I think these are probably the best Fiend-Smith decks now, tentatively. But again, how much play they'll see, I don't know. And then Chimera is like a worse version of these decks. Like it has a strong combo and everything, but it just has more engine requirements, has less room for non-engine, and yeah, and also Chimera has somehow seen less play than even Yubel and White Forest. Like I don't remember the last time I played against a Chimera player, even last format, and I can't see it. I can't see this with the release of Malice, this deck getting more popular, because Malice is also another bad matchup. You know, banishing graveyard I hear is very banishing Chimera cards from your graveyard I hear is very good. Yeah, also Lancia stops. It doesn't stop as much in Chimera as it does in some other decks, I suppose. It can stop like the the banishing, the fusions from banishing themselves from the grave, but that's not your main play in Chimera anyways. Yeah, and Punk is another like Fiend-Smith combo wish deck, which has the issue of just not having any space for non-engine. Like it has almost a Chimera problem. Like you would think that Punk would be like a mid-range deck that runs lots of hand traps, but like in fact, Punk on average, I've seen Punk lists run less hand traps than U-Bell and White Force, especially this, and they're running non-engines more similar to like Chimera decks or something, which is like an issue because you cannot play into the Malice end board because you're playing like a Fiend-Smith deck and you're playing a Punk that also somewhat cares about stopping your graveyard, and like obviously the White Binder just ruins your life in that sense if you try to play into it with your engine. And Lancia, it's okay into Lancia. Not as good in Droll. So again, if Droll sees play, it's another issue with this deck in particular. But yeah, it's really hard to differentiate because like I could see arguments for putting this up here, or I can see arguments for putting all three of these down here. Like it's really give or take. I don't think Fiend-Smith decks are bad per se. It's just that it's the Fiend-Smith engine is strong, but like the decks that the most popular decks that play the Fiend-Smith engine, I have questions about. So yeah, that's why it's like this. I'm really struggling with the placement of Chimera and Punk. My lack of experience with these decks kind of shows. So yeah, at the expense of people getting mad at me, I guess. I guess we'll do. I'm sorry. Get mad at me, Punk players. I don't really believe in Punk this format. I'm not gonna front, but yeah, I think there are better Fiends combo decks to play than Punk. But yeah, and then Tearlaments is like Tearlaments hasn't really changed. I'm gonna be honest. If anything, like it's like other Malice, the most common deck in the game probably runs more Bestials, but every other deck probably runs less Bestials. So overall, that's like feels like not much of a change. And then like Lancia, like you don't give a shit about Lancia at all. So it's like this basically the same position as it was before. It's not good into. I'm not gonna front it. This is actually not good into Malice whatsoever tier. So like I'm kind of tempted to also place like specifically if only for its matchup against Malice, it's not particularly good going second. Like you don't run near enough hand traps to stop them getting to their end board, and then once they do, like you almost cannot play into it unless you do something crazy like I don't know, super poly discard Shuffler, like discard Keldo or Medora. And then, you have the Medora to check their GWC, and then you also get rid of their board. Like, maybe in that specific 2-card combo you have a chance, but, like, otherwise I can't see you really winning that much going second either with tier. So that's... Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I just remember, but I guess the Lightsworn Tearlaments FTK decks that have been, like, topping the recent rating duels, those kind of do get cooked by Lancia, don't they? Because they rely on Snow to, infinitely summon itself back as material, which obviously you cannot use Snow under Lancia, so that's kind of rough. Yeah, yeah, whatever. Just I think maybe just stick to the standard tier at that point in this format. Yeah, onto this next group of decks. Like these decks are what I like to consider the casualties of Malice. That in one way, shape, or form, Malice being a top deck has made the format very unfavorable to most of these next upcoming decks. So number one, Ritual Beast, Lancia. Do I gotta say more? Like, oh my god, Lancia versus this might be the single deck hurt most by Lancia besides Malice itself, which is fucking Ritual Beast, man. They totally deserve that. Also, like, Ritual Beast does technically have an auto win versus Malice. Like, I feel like you should win versus Malice every time you resolve your combo because you go Protos. Similar to Tenyi. Just don't get Lancia at forehead. Also, it's not just Lancia. If there's also Impulse. Impulse is really annoying to actually combo through it, and especially to actually achieve your end board of Protos with Ritual Beast. I will say is that Ritual Beast is not the worst into Malice, because Ritual Beast doesn't care about its stuff getting banished as much, and that's especially if it already gets a setup when your opponent's Malice was trying to play Ancient board, and for some reason you didn't successfully Protoss them, but let's say they hand you a couple times, but you still establish a half board. White Binders being able to against other decks, White Binder would just rip your graveyard and rip the resources of all the other decks. That does not really apply for Ritual Beast, because if you White Binder a Ritual Beast grave, they actually don't care about that at all. They actually say thank you. But yeah, there's so much shit you gotta dodge playing Ritual Beast this format. Aside from the fact that you already are not great going second, if you go second, even playing the Malice, it's probably not great, because they could just draw three. It's not just about their end board. It's the fact that they play Impulse and Ash, obviously, but the Impulse especially, and they draw 3 to 4 cards. So you're gonna have to deal with that annoying non-engine that's actually impactful versus you, because the non-engine that's being played now is actually impactful against Ritual Beast, unlike it was a lot before. Because now between Lancia, Dominus, Impulse, and Maxi and Foolos, there's so much shit you gotta dodge while playing Ritual Beast. It's that if you can dodge all those, you have a fine deck, but I don't really trust the Ritual Beast ability to consistently dodge all those cards. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't. This is definitely. I feel this is not the format to play Ritual Beast, in my opinion. But yeah. Speaking of not the format, it's going to be all of these decks. But Mimighoul. Okay, Mimighoul. I don't think it's It's not the Lancia itself. It's the fact that top deck in the format, the most common deck is going to play 3 copies of Dominus Impulse. That is basically death for Mimighoul. Basically, anytime that Malice is a top tier deck, I feel like Mimighoul is borderline unplayable, because it's even worse. It's one thing to lose to Lancia, but the fact that you lose to three of in the most common deck in the game in Dominus Impulse almost feels worse, because last format, again, there weren't many decks that were playing Dominus Impulse. There's Mermail dropped Dominus Impulse because it's Sekkas, and then there wasn't really another deck that commonly in the top tier decks that played Dominus Impulse, so you could get away with it. But you can not avoid Dominus Impulse with Mimighoul now. And if you're wondering why Dominus Impulse sucks for Mimighoul, Mimighoul's gimmick is you give your opponent your Mimighoul monsters, and then you flip them up on their side of the field, and then they get effects that benefit you. But if the monsters are on your opponent's side of the field, so it's technically your opponent activating the effects that are beneficial to you. But if your opponent is under Impulse, Mimighoul monsters are Earth monsters. So if your opponent impulses you from the hand, they cannot use Earth monster effects. So the monsters that the Mimighoul monsters you give your opponent turn into vanillas that don't do anything, do not give you any beneficial effects. You're literally just giving them free bodies. Your entire gimmick of your deck is turned off. Yeah, that's... If you really want to dodge if you want to dodge the most commonly played deck in the format, and you want to dodge a 3-up that they play in the deck, feel free. Otherwise, you're opening yourself up to just getting completely wrecked. This might be the single deck hurt most by the addition of Malice in the entire game. It's really not. It's really unfortunate. There's nothing more to say, really. Next is Centurion Dragon Link. So these are decks that depend on Bystials, or that decks that benefit a lot from Bystials. In that Centurion, Centurion has very good synergy with Bystials, not just the levels being level 6 and Libellum being level 8 for synchros. The fact that you can synchro on your opponent's turn, the fact that synchroing for Chaos Angel on your opponent's turn with a Bystial is a very good play, and also lets you establish an interruption through a hand trap. That's Bystials are really good in Centurion. Bystials are really bad against Malice, so that's a lot of power. When Bystials are bad, decks that rely on Bystials for their engine are, it's really, yeah, it's not a great time. As previously mentioned with the Fiend-Smith decks too, but Centurion depends on Bystials even more. I guess you can say Centurion, Fiend-Smith, Bystial, less so, but you're still relying on heals quite a bit. It's kind of weird. Like Dragon Link is the same way. Dragon Link also depends on Bystials as extenders because it's very beneficial when your extenders are also non-engine and useful hand traps. They're not useful hand traps, so like you just really lack non-engine space then, because you still have to run that requisite amount of Bystials just because you're playing Dragon Link, just because you're playing extenders, but they're not good as hand traps. So like you're just way worse going second. Also, you know, I wouldn't say popularized, but I was a fan of the Primite build, and the Primite is obviously obviously a bit worse now into Malice as well. So it's not my fave. Not my favorite format for Dragon Link either. We can be honest. And Flu. I mean, we talked about Lancia already enough. Flu under Lancia is a meme. Like this deck, this deck was already down here when Lancia saw Zero play. The fact that Lancia is like already one of the most commonly played hand traps now, it's like kind of cursed. Not gonna lie. So it deserves a space down here too. Like I don't know how that one guy got the rating duels playing fucking Flu in a format where the top deck plays, where every deck is playing Lancia, and like the top deck also sometimes plays Droll, which is like just. I don't know. I mean, you dodge Impulse. You don't care about Impulse. That's a positive, I guess. That's maybe the only positive. Yeah, Melodious. So Melodious' strength used to be that Melodious had like the best non-engine lineup in the game, and that it had a combination of Purge and Herald of the Orange Light. And I mean, it's obviously still play those, but Purge is significantly worse this format. Like that's one of the perks of playing these light-based decks, these Purge decks, is that you can run Purge, and like that's not. Purge is really not that good against Malice, so like that's not really a benefit now. And then Lancia. So Lancia doesn't kill Melodious per se, but unless you're going second. If you're playing Melodious and you're going second into a board, then Lancia does kind of really hurt you because it turns off your Schuberta, but mostly it turns off your Etoile. And Etoile is like the best card in your deck, and it's honestly the best way you play into boards too, by just bouncing like infinite face-up cards your opponent controls. You can't do that under Lancia. And speaking of like Schuberta, by the way, Schuberta is terrible into Malice. Like one of the benefits of Melodious was that Melodious had White Binder before White Binder. It had Schuberta, which is basically just White Binder except for a Melodious card. But now that's not its niche anymore. And in fact. And here's the fucked up part. It's because White Binder is good against Melodious, but Schuberta is terrible against Malice. So like, how is that fair? That's they both have the same effect. They just banish 3 cards from the graveyard, but one deck cares about cards in the graveyard, and the other does not whatsoever. Like, come on. Like, what is this? What is this theme, Konami? But yeah, that's not really my favorite format for Melodious now. Herald of the Orange Light is still good. I will admit that. Herald of the Orange Light is pretty decent. It gets rid of a body, but it's also not as good because if you Herald of the Orange Light, say a Dormouse, but that puts the Dormouse in the graveyard, so if they have a hair, then they can just extend anyways, and sometimes it's like not that. It's not like the most impactful. It's not as impactful as it was before. It's still Herald of the Orange Light is still good, though. Don't get me wrong. It's still probably better than most other hand traps. It's just that there's less, I guess, opportunities to where it would be turn ending as there was before. And yeah, it's still it's still like competent. Like if you go first and you set up your board, like it's still decent. I'm not sure there's also another deck where I don't think you can play Lancia in, because again, your biggest form of interruptions are 1, Schuberta, except against Malice, and 2, it's Etoile, and both of those require you to banish cards. So like if you Lancia, you cannot use those cards, so it's like the Primate Fiend-Smith situation where like you don't really want to. It turns off your own interruptions. So, yes, yeah, not. Man, this rogue here is like a mess now. It's just a bunch of it's just a bunch of decks getting collateral, like hit with collateral damage. Speaking of, oh yeah, Gimmick Puppet. So the thing that makes Gimmick Puppet really annoying, as you know, is the fact that it can basically it has cards that say you cannot interact with Gimmick Puppet. Under Lancia, that's actually not really the case anymore, because under Lancia, you cannot banish Terror Baby to make which means that your opponent can respond to your Terror Baby makes your opponent unable to respond to your Gimmick Puppet monster effects, and then this spell makes your opponent unable to target your Gimmick Puppet monsters. You can't use either of those under Lancia because you can't banish them from the graveyard. So it actually makes your deck interactable, provided that you don't have the field spell. The field spell is still kind of annoying, but I mean, if you're going second, you also, like, this deck is terrible into Malice. It's like white binder the graveyard, and like it's gone, like it's all gone. What happened to it? It's banished. It's like you don't Malice doesn't even care about the field spell, because Malice will just target your grave instead, and like the field spell doesn't protect your grave, so like that's an issue as well. It's yeah, another deck where it's like I don't know. It can still FTK going first. Even if it gets Lancia, like Lancia stops the protection, but I'm pretty sure you can still establish an FTK through it, so you need another hand trap at least on top of the Lancia to stop it. It's not like Ritual Beast where it just stops you entirely, but I'm also not a fan of FTK decks getting hit by a very common non-engine. Also, there's Dominus. Dominus Impulse hits even under the field spell protection. Dominus Impulse can the fact that you can Dominus Impulse the rank up spell is actually also really annoying. Like it's just a bad matchup all around for Malice. Like I actually don't like the matchup at all. It seems yeah, it's all a bunch of bad Malice matchups down here in Rogue. And next we're on to like the stun decks of this group. So like why stun is like kind of collateral damage is because the most common floodgates that we've seen in the past were Macrocosmos and D-Fisher. Those are not good versus Malice for obvious reasons, because Malice also trigger off banish. So like the fact that the most popular floodgates you run in the floodgate decks are no longer that good. Are no longer that good at floodgates. Then what do you do, right? Like you got to play more floodgates, but the quality of the floodgates I feel like goes down quite a bit. Also, deck lockdown is not good. I don't think deck lockdown is good against Malice either, because Malice doesn't directly add from hand. It doesn't directly special summon from deck. So that's actually that's the stun decks, man. The Kashtira, I mean, Unicorn going first is actually pretty decent because it means your opponent can't hand trap you. Otherwise, they lose their white binder or like their red ransom or whatever. So it's there. It's like I don't know. It doesn't seem. These stun decks don't seem that fantastic either. Like Exodia got nerfed on the ban list. Like it lost 2 starters, so it only has 16 starters now. I know only, but it kind of forced you to run a lower deck count so that you draw into your Exodia bricks more often. And again, Macro and D-Fisher lose a lot of power this format, so you're going first is worse because your floodgates are worse. Although you still establish a decent amount of interruption. Like the Exod Word Wipe is still decently good against Malice, provided you don't have a fucking Macrocosmos up. But yeah, I don't. Next up, primarily you or like depend a lot on the floodgates now. Have a lot less good floodgates to work with. So like, yeah, here Runic is also. I really do not believe in the Runic deck, the Runic stun deck. So I think it's the worst of the stun decks personally. At least Fossil Knight or normal summon Fossil Knight or normal summon Barrier Statue does stop your Malice opponent from doing stuff. So yeah. Next is Soda. This is just a warrior combo. Again, very similar thing to Drago Slayer. Is that this is a deck that tries to like pseudo FTK going first and going second. It has, even though the decks are stronger, the best deck is like stronger than Malice. It has more options for turn skips because going second is not really reliable with these kinds of decks. But at the very least, now that Lancia is an option to attempt to try and sack your opponent with, if you weren't gonna win anyways, just having an extra sack option probably doesn't hurt your win rate going second, and I don't think Lancia really affects Infernoble that much. So yeah. These final decks are decks that I actually think have a hidden potential in the Malice match. I won't say they're going to be like winning matches or anything, but they actually have like they have some stuff that some stuff to bring to the matchup. So first, Voiceless Voice. So Voiceless Voice, it does have one very annoying thing that gets hit by Lancia, in that the Saphira banish to ritual summon effect engrave does get turned off by Lancia, so that's kind of annoying. But at the same time, that's like kind of like just growing Saphira in a sense before, where you still get the search off Saphira, so you can still search the ritual, and then you just need a ritual. You maybe can't use Saphira to ritual summon, but you have other ways to ritual summon, like the ritual spells, which you have very high access to ritual spells between pre-prep, hard drawing the spell, the Deer Servant, and then like you have other ways to ritual summon, like getting Blessing on the field, which I guess is a bit more inconvenient, but yeah. Also, Dominus Impulse does not really affect you for the most part, since you can play around Dominus Impulse in a sense. If you don't use your use prayers, your ritual spell to ritual summon, and you use Saphira Engrave to ritual summon, provided you're not under Lancia, then if you don't control any other cards on the field, then your opponent cannot Dominus Impulse that from hand, because you control no cards. So yeah, and at that point, after you get the ritual summon off, no matter what they Dominus Impulse, it's too late. If you, even regardless of like what you set up a chain as, if you do Skull Guardian Chainlink 1, low Chainlink 2, and your opponent impulses the low effect to special itself back, I mean, you just search another low with Skull Guardian and normal summon it, and then it's that. Or you could just chain block the low from Dominus Impulse if you really want to in the first place, and then like it's hard to stop Voiceless Voice with some of the common hand traps that Malice runs. This deck is underratedly resilient into hand traps. Provided you like play around like whatever. Like you can't play around everything. Sometimes if you like play around one thing like Imperm, or you try to play around, I don't know, Dominus Impulse, you sometimes play into Droll, which sometimes is played, so it's weird. If you try to play around Lancia, then you play into Impulse, so like it's kind of like sometimes randomly you can get sacked, but this deck has enough engine to where generally through any single hand trap you can easily set up your board, and then when you set up your board, it's actually your board is actually very sticky versus Malice. Like if you set up a double Seravis, like if you set up one Seravis and then plus Blessing to summon the Seravis a second time, that kind of just like it's really hard for your opponent, for Malice to play through that. They can't target your stuff, they can't target Seravis. The moment they link into something, and you can just negate it, and it doesn't matter if you like they go in the Red Ransom and you negate it with Seravis. It doesn't matter that the Red Ransom got banished, because the Red Ransom was never summoned properly in the first place. So like it doesn't do you can't summon it back because it was never properly summoned, even if it gets banished. Same with the White Binder and so on and so forth. So yeah, this board is actually quite difficult for Malice to deal with most of the time. And again, it's like unlike these other decks down in Rogue, it's not as killed by the hand trap and the non-engines choices that Malice plays. So yeah, I think this is like there's some potential in Voiceless Voice. It's not the greatest. Again, this is a deck that would normally run Purge, but Purge isn't that great right now, so it's like kind of iffy. It's alright. It's aight. Voiceless Voice, I can see it. It's aight. It's Labyrinth. Labyrinth theoretically has a very like a very above average Malice matchup. Like I'm not gonna say it's good or like great matchup, but like because like how great can your matchup be versus Malice? But yeah, against the hand traps, for the most part, Lancia, like what is that, right? what the hell is Lancia? What do you care? So you're playing trap cards, so like you're a lot of the hand traps that Malice runs just don't really interact with you, except Dominus Impulse. I will say Dominus Impulse is really fucking annoying, because Dominus Impulse can stop either of the Welcome Labyrinths, but Dominus Impulse is also a trap card. So if you have a Lady Labyrinth up, even if they Dominus Impulse your Welcome, you at least get to set a trap off the Dominus Impulse. So it's not the worst. Like it doesn't get killed by you do get your play stopped by Dominus Impulse, but you recoup some resources from it, as opposed to other decks that just get owned by Dominus Impulse. And going first, it's really hard. It's kind of hard for Malice to deal with back row, honestly. Especially, I know linear simultaneous equation cannon is kind of bad versus Malice, but you know what isn't bad against Malice? The Daruma cannon. So yeah, that's just play the Daruma cannon. It's just the Daruma cannon and Malice instead of simultaneous equation cannon. Like that's fine. That'll work. That's good enough going first. Especially like they can't play around the Daruma cannon really. Especially if you have a established Lady Labyrinth on the field already. So yeah, this deck going first, it has a pretty. You don't even need to really resolve Welcome Labyrinth versus Malice to win going first with Labyrinth. So that's positive. And going second, like. Yeah, it is annoying that you don't really run enough hand traps usually to stop them. You could run a furniture build that plays like a bunch of mulch armies just you can discard, but then playing the furniture build actually opens you up to getting hit by Malice, the Malice engine, because the White Binder banishing all your stuff in your graveyard actually hurts quite a bit more. Whereas if you play a trap heavy build, then it's like whatever. You don't really have any good banish targets besides the Welcome Labyrinths, which one you can chain, and then two it's like that's not even that big of a deal. So yeah, Labyrinth theoretically has like a on paper it's not the worst against Malice, but I don't have yet to see it in practice yet, so I'm gonna hold my like judgment on like whether it's truly good, but it's decent. It's there have been worse metas for Labyrinth, like the last format, so this one is like maybe not as bad. Pearly. So Pearly does not give two shits about Lancia, and it also Impulse is kind of okay. So Impulse can be, I guess, kind of annoying, I suppose. Like Pearly can run a lot of hand traps, and they can run Lancia itself. And specifically with Pearly is another one of these decks. Pearly is one of the decks that draws more cards during its combo than Malice does. So you can imagine you set up Pearly, you set up a draw 2 or draw 6. You're going to guarantee you draw Lancia basically in that time. Lancia or Chaos Hunter. Probably Lancia, but because like Chaos Hunter requires a discard, and like you already discard for your other cards, so like probably Lancia is the way to go. But you can consistently see Lancia if you resolve your combo, and that consistently beats. Consistently seeing Lancia means you consistently beat Malice. I will say that Dominus Impulse depends on how they use it, because if they use Dominus Impulse on your quick play spells, that's not the right way to use Dominus Impulse versus Pearly, because Pearly has so many quick play spells that you can hit one. If they have any other one, they can just extend past it anyways. What you kind of want to do is that if you Dominus Impulse, it's supposed to hit Pearly Eve. If you hit Pearly Eve, that's actually a big deal, because then it prevents the towers from going out, which by the way, towers is also somewhat weird for Malice to out. I guess they can make a big monster, but the big monster just gets like Axico can just get spun back, so that's not really too much of a concern. Not to mention the fact that the Noir honestly is not even the biggest threat or the biggest issue with the Pearly combo in the Malice matchup. The biggest issue is the fact that they're drawing 4 to 6 cards and drawing into Lancia. But yeah, if you Dominus Impulse, the Pearly Eve, that actually hurts because it cuts off half your draws and it stops the tower from coming out. So that is somewhat of a big deal. So it's not a perfect matchup, but otherwise, Fuelos doesn't really matter. Droll, this deck can play around Droll pretty easily. It's like Nibiru. What is that? I haven't even mentioned Nibiru at all. This because Nibiru is also not too great against Malice for most of the time, but yeah, Pearly. I don't know if you can avoid getting your if people use their Dominus Impulse wrong, or if you can avoid getting your Pearly Dominus Impulse, like that is actually not a terrible matchup. Especially since this Pearly also has room for run some of the most non-engine in the game, like up there with stuff like the Fiend-Smith decks and like the Tenpai and stuff like that, and Blue Eyes in terms of the number of hand traps you can run. And that is also the most reliable way to stop Malice, is trying to get them to just hand trap them, because you don't want them to, even if you can break their board, the cards that they draw is probably going to be too much for you, so like you just want to stop them getting your combo. But yeah, in theory, I like Pearly too. These are like there's it's not hopeless. It's not like hopeless like these rogue decks below it. And Sprite. So Sprite, I'm gonna be testing this. Sprite is one of the decks that I'm gonna be testing for Pearly, mainly because of Manic and Cat, or for Pearly, Jesus Christ, no, not Pearly, definitely not Pearly, but for Malice, mainly because of Manic and Cat. So Manic and Cat can summon any monster from deck with the same attribute as the monster your opponent controls. So it's very simple. Like, you probably see where this is going. Your opponent summons a Malice monster, you Manic and Cat summon Chaos Hunter from your deck. Boom. And unlike with the raw Chaos Hunter that you summon when you go second, this Chaos Hunter you summon under Sprite Elves so that they can't Nightmare Cerberus it. So they actually have to physically enter battle phase and run it over. And that's where, like, you gotta find protection to protect your Chaos Hunter from battle. So, like, there's options like IP, not into SP, mind you. Like, the fact that you search Chaos Hunter means that you can't rely on IP into SP. Instead, you want to go IP into like Goddess instead, or some other option. Like maybe we bring back IP into Avermax. IP into Avermax actually stops them from attacking over your Chaos Hunter, and they can't target it because it's under Sprite Elf. So like, actually, that sounds might be cooking a little bit here. Yeah, and so like, obviously there's like options that Sprite can do to really bully Malice going first, and Sprite is very good into hand traps. Even Dominus Impulse, Imperm plus Impulse can hurt a bit, but Sprite has so many extenders now with all its names at 3, and you can run additional extension pieces on top of it to where conventional hand traps like should not stop you. It's just the Max Z that stops you, really. Lancia, who gives a shit about Lancia? Like, it turns off Smashers. I wouldn't even run Smashers if you're going for the Chaos Hunter off Manic and Cat anyways. But yeah, going second, obviously it's yeah, you can troll yourself going first against Maxi with Troll, but Troll, again, it's the Malice issue of Troll is bad against Malice, but it's good against Maxi. So like, I don't know, that's up to you whether you want to run it. Going second, yeah, you're never gonna beat an established Malice board. Like, Sprite is never gonna win through like 2 banishes on its summons, but you do have room for a decent amount of hand traps. So you just try the hand trap your opponent. And Sprite is itself a Dominus Impulse deck. I forgot to mention that with Labyrinth too. Labyrinth itself is a Dominus Impulse deck, so it has that going for it, and Sprite also has that going for it. So Dominus Impulse being one of the better hand traps versus Malice is actually decent. Now, you can't run Dominus Impulse if you run the Fiend-Smith, right? So like, it's kind of depends on which build you go for, but yeah, there's some potential in Sprite. I can see it. I know Sprite is probably like the least established out of all the last 4 decks I mentioned, so I'm not gonna overrate it, but I think it's still. I think there's something there with Sprite. Maybe like some semi-reliable strategy you can use versus Malice involving Chaos Hunter and Manic and Cat. But yeah, those are that's my 1 hour plus. I don't even want to think about how I've recorded like 7 clips right now, and like, I don't know how long it is total, but I'm gonna dread it when I look in the editor. But yeah, thank you if you watched this whole thing. Thank you again for being a god and helping my watch time, because like, I know that's something I have problem with, is like viewer retention. So thank you for the very few who stick around, and obviously tell me what I got wrong and tell me what you disagree with. I'm sure there's plenty more that we can discuss in the comments further. So yeah, let's yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the comments. Alright guys, this is Future Me. I realized that there was something that was like glaringly staking out with this tier list at the end, and that is that the placement of Centurion, I actually don't see a reason why this is even so high in Rogue, because I actually realized that now that not only are Bystials bad, but kind of don't want to run Lancia in this deck, because if you go Lancia, you can't use your own Blazar Dragon. So that's kind of not only can you not use your Bystials, you cannot use your Chaos Angel Synchro Summon, you can't use your Blazar Negate. That's yeah, I actually don't see the reason for why this should be that high then. Like, it's yeah. Okay, so before you yell at me, so I'm sorry, Centurion fans. I'm a Centurion fan myself. It hurts to do this, but yeah. And also, I'm looking at the tier 2, and Fighting Snake Eyes, it's probably begrudgingly too high, because like, all the other decks around it have proven that they've been at the top of the meta, or at least the top of tier 2 in the past format, whereas Fire King Snake Eyes really hasn't. Mostly because like there's a better Snake Eyes deck available to play because of Oak being illegal, and now with Oak being banned, like I think this is the best way. But again, it's unproven. There's no results to base this on. It's just vibes, so I can't objectively say it's probably better than Memento and Branded, who have actually have results in like actual tournaments and big events like the World Championship qualifiers. That being said, I'm still gonna keep it ahead of Tenpai because I think this is the better fire deck still. You know, you can come at me for that, but yeah, thanks.